Hello, everyone. Welcome to this interview of the Lotus Eaters. I'm very pleased today to be interviewing Raphaël Paillot from France. And we are going to talk about the very sad events, the murder of Quentin last week. And Raphaël, I'm very pleased to be interviewing you today. Where can people find you?
Well, I'm pleased too, and people can find me on my X account, Raph Payot. They can find me on my YouTube channel called Panache, in French, of course, and also on Substack, raphaelpayot.substack.com. And soon I'm planning to translate my writings in English, so they will be able to find me there when it will launch soon.
We have been talking for some time on X. It's
Yeah.
more than a year now, I think. And I'm very pleased to be talking to you in person today.
Yeah,
So,
well, I think you are a very interesting thinker and philosopher. I would have liked to talk to you about your philosophy instead of the murder of one of my friends, but here we are, and I'm glad that I thank you for giving me the opportunity to defend his name and his memory because it wasn't done so by the French media. So yeah, thank you again.
you're welcome, and thank you very much for agreeing this. And I know that this is going to be a very emotional interview because we are talking about a friend of yours who
Yeah.
was killed by leftists. So what happened?
Well, it started with a political speech given by Rima Hassan. She's a Palestinian refugee given the French nationality, and she was elected at the European Parliament under the banner of La France Insoumise, so France Unbound, I think we can translate it. And uh, she she became popular because she is a fierce and I would say vicious uh, advocate for the Palestinian cause. She organized a political speech in Sciences Po, a political school for in France. And in France, as in Britain or America or everywhere in Europe, most of universities and schools are leaning left.
Yeah.
So she was acclaimed by the people waiting for her to speak. And in front of the school, a few girls, there were seven women, 6 or 7 women, came to protest with a banner saying no to Islamo-leftism or something like that. And they asked for a group of guys to came not to fight, but to deter aggression from the left. Quentin was part of that group. He was there to dissuade the Antifa to attack the women. They attacked them nonetheless. A first confrontation happened group against group. Then, a little bit later, Quentin and two other activists were uh, were trapped in a nearby street, and they were viciously attacked. And Quentin suffered more than I don't know exactly, but maybe 20 hit. They hit him on the ground. They focused on the head. They aimed for his head. So so he suffered grave injuries. First, he was able to stand up, to walk. His friends tried to get him back to his place. But before going there, he wasn't being able to speak, to keep working. So they called for the hospital, what we call SAMU in France. So the people coming to pick you up when you are in dire condition came. He was uh, he was sent to the hospital, but w- they tried to save him, but he suffered two grave injuries, and he was brain dead during the night of Thursday and Friday. And 2 days later, he was pronounced dead. So yeah, that's the overall of how he came to be killed by a mob of Antifa.
So there was a speech at Sciences Politique, which is one of the biggest, I think perhaps is the biggest university when it comes to politics in France, isn't it?
Well, it used to be the most prestigious, yeah, but of
Yeah.
course nowadays it is garbage. But it used to be the most prestigious, yeah.
So we have there a Palestinian giving a speech about Palestine and other leftist issues. And as you say, there were several women there. Did they have the name Nemesis Collective?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the name is Nemesis. It's a right-wing feminist collective.
Yes.
So, and their method is to do agitprop, to
Yeah.
go to places, to protest, always pacifically, but to try to gather attention on their message. And this time, their message was against the infiltration of universities by Islamists and leftists,
Yes.
and both work hand in hand to get the control of universities. So they were protesting against that, and as expected, they were attacked by leftists. Because the historic of their mobilization, in the beginning, they didn't ask for protection for security, but they started to try to organize their protection because of the frequency, the sheer amount of time they were attacked.
Yes.
And this time they tried to do so, but at first, when people tried to disturb their protest, they couldn't do it because of the group of men here to protect them. So they went to ask for the leftist militia, the Antifa militia called La Jeune Garde, the Young Guard, and they came and they were prepared, and they thought uh, they wanted the fight, the violence.
Question. When it comes to this Le Jean Garde,
Yes, Young Guard.
pardon my pronunciation, was this a banned space created by leftists, MPs who are now members of the French
Yeah,
Parliament, who
okay.
are now also affiliated with Mélenchon's party?
Yeah, I see where you want to go. So, La Jeune Garde, the Young Guard, was created back in 2018.
Yes.
What was peculiar about this association was its willingness to talk to the institutional left.
Yes.
Before, the Antifa groups were autonomous and independent. They were against party, against syndicate. I don't know if it's the same word in English, and against every kind of organized representation of the left. The Young Guard came and said, "We are going to seek good relationships with the institutional actors. We are going to have spokespersons to speak on behalf of our organization. And basically, what Raphaël Arnaud tried to do was to give to anti-fascists a good PR,
Okay.
a good public relation. Then, as uh, as in 2025 and in 2024, sorry, in 2024, Raphaël Arnaud, the founder of the association, was elected MP under the banner of La France Insoumise, the same banner under which Rima Hassan was elected at the European Parliament. Back then, it was the officialization of an alliance between the far left in France, the far left party, and the far left militia. It was the officialization of their alliance.
So they came
La,
there and they hit Quentin.
la Jeune Garde, the Young Guard, was what is called dissolution in French. So they were dissolved by the Minister of Interior at the time, Bruno Retailleau, which mean they are prevented by law to gather again. But of course, they don't care at all about it. Some anti-fascist group even brag about the fact that they have been dissolved and keep gathering together. So they they weren't afraid of it at all. And this group was the group who attacked Quentin uh, the night he died.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good example of several things. And I forgot to mention an important detail. Three of the people involved in the murder were assistants of Raphaël Arnaud. They were assistants of a currently elect French MP
In the party of Mélenchon.
in the party of Mélenchon.
And when you say they were assistants, are they current assistants? Question number one, are they assistants currently? And question number two, if yes, in what capacity are they assistants? How do they assist him?
Well, one of them uh, was currently an assistant. Another was also, but he was registered on the site of the French Parliament under a pseudonym, which is already a scandal.
Yes.
And the third used to be an assistant, but his contract ended a few weeks before the murder. So it was deep ties between Raphaël Arnaud and the murderers. What were they doing at the French Parliament? It's a big mystery.
Okay.
We don't know. It seems to me, but it's not established yet. But it seems to me um, it was a fake job. They didn't do anything. As a MP, Raphaël Arnaud barely did any contribution to the parliamentary discussions.
But he is associated with them. I suspect the number of assistants for each member of
Yeah.
parliament isn't is low. It isn't hundreds
Well,
in the
yeah,
hundreds.
of course, you had three, four, not that much, and you are paid. You are paid by the French Parliament. So those people were paid by the French Parliament.
Which
Why
means
were
also
they?
funded by the French people who pay taxes.
Yeah, of course, but it's in France, as in UK, as in America, as in everywhere in Europe, the left deems itself uh, worthy of getting people money for its own behalf.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, it's usual for them. Uh, the question is, why were they in Lyon on a Thursday night while their MP for whom they worked was in Paris. He was elected in Avignon, which is not near Lyon. So why were they in Lyon and not in Avignon or Paris?
Yeah.
We don't know yet because, of course, the centrists are trying to the the president of the French Parliament is a Macron MP. Of course, she didn't made public what was the agenda of those assistants. Were they expected to be in Lyon, and if so, for what reason? Or were they expected somewhere else? But then, why were they in Lyon? We don't know. We don't know. We haven't got the information yet. So it's a big scandal, and of course they killed someone. They killed someone. So what does it mean for the French Parliament? We let inside a non-Antifa, someone who was already condemned for violence, who are under surveillance by the French intelligence. The left allowed him to get elected. And then his assistant proceeded to kill someone. What does it mean for French parliament, for French politics? It's a very consequential political affair.
I want us to focus a bit on Quentin and your friendship. Who was Quentin as a person?
Well, Quentin was a very deeply convinced Catholic. I met him at the church. I was going at the same church as him. So that's where I met him. Most of his friends met him there. He met a lot of people at the church because he was a regular. And he was also a convinced nationalist activist. In French, we say militant, but apparently militant in English means more violent activism. But and in France, for violent activism, we mean activism. So it's a little bit confusing for the English-speaking
So,
audience.
what forms of activism was he engaged in?
Pacifist.
Okay.
He wasn't engaged in violent activism. That's what I was trying to say with
Yeah.
this little precision on vocabulary. Actually, the last time I talked to him, he was asking me to speak at a conference he wanted to organize. What he wanted to do was to organize conferences, to chat about political ideas, to defend his nationalist conviction, but he was not engaged in violent activity. Of course, he was engaged uh, in he engaged with a group the night he died for security purposes, but it was aimed at uh, defense and not attack. And
We
what I
also
say is,
know, sorry to help you, we know how the left has infiltrated universities, especially universities in France have a long history of leftist activism from within. We remember
yeah,
May 1968. So I really struggle to think that a few people who would go there to help these women who were talking about these issues would go there with particularly violent or offense or with the intention to assault an institution that is almost entirely uh, governed by the left.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. No.
very hard to think that they went there to attack people.
Yeah. It's not even my opinion. The police investigation has already established they weren't there to attack, but they were attacked, and they were attacked with the intent to maybe not kill, but at least hurt a lot. Uh, this morning, an information was made public. Apparently, I haven't checked yet, but apparently, the leader of the attack uh, screamed, "Kill him!" Apparently, he had a scream that. Maybe I haven't checked it yet, but I wouldn't be surprised by it because I don't know if you have seen the video.
Yes,
The
I
video,
have.
on the video, it is obvious. It's not just some intimidation. I have another friend of mine who got attacked, but they tried to intimidate him. So they put him on the ground. They hit him, but not on the head, and then they left. It was intimidation.
Yes.
Uh, it was intimidation. There, they hit him on the ground. They aimed at the head, and they gave more than 10 hits to the head. Of course, the intent was to hurt and maybe to kill. So far, the police uh, is not saying so. So we'll see how it evolves, but so far they're
Hits
not
on the
claiming it.
head, even let me just say this so, as someone who just listens to it but also having checked the video, is that hits on the head are incredibly much more dangerous than hits on the belly, for instance,
Yeah.
because even if they don't leave someone dead on the spot in some cases, and you mentioned this as an example of such a case, there are so many dangers with it. For instance, paralysis or severe concussion. There are so many dangers with it that could be that that imply that it is a crime in and of itself. Even if the person whose head is kicked doesn't die because of it, that doesn't mean that the damage done to them isn't severe.
Hmm. Yeah, of course. But the Observatoire des violences politiques, so Observatory of Political Violence, uh, made an article shortly after the death of Quentin, compiling every instance of Antifa beating people on the head, on the ground, and in the head, before Quentin died. Actually, uh, a, a 10, 20 guy could have been murdered before Quentin because it's a common method of attack from the left. They do
Indeed.
it regularly. He was the first to die, but before him, some of them were injured, uh, permanently injured, and a lot were attacked before him. He was just the first to die, but they are doing it regularly. It's really important to understand it's not just something that happened and it's just bad luck. No, in France, Antifa have a Telegram canal. I don't know the name in English. They have a group on which they share the video they make of the people they attack.
Yeah.
That's how unafraid they are from justice. And on the video, we can see them calling a penalty the fact of hitting people on the head. They call it a séance de penalty. A penalty, I don't know the soccer vocabulary, but a penalty shoot, a penalty shoot.
Like a punishment or something.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's in their culture. It's in their culture. It's advocated for.
So he was a non-violent Catholic and French nationalist. And what sort of ideas did he have about France? Do you want to share or not?
Well, he was he was right wing, of course, so opposed to immigration, opposed to the economic destruction of the country. He was for a, a return to faith against the Islamization of the country. I mean, I mean, what he has is pretty standard right-wing ideas, standard nationalist ideas. In France, nationalists uh, historically were often Catholics because it was the historical religion of France. In France, nationalists, uh, historically, nationalists did use violence, but but it's important to understand they weren't the ones starting it. 1789 was the French Revolution, which became a symbolic event for every leftist across the world. The time we made the revolution. Then, a few years later, it became what we call la terreur, the terror,
Yeah, the
where
reign
uh,
of terror in
the,
English
the
for the
reign
viewers.
the reign of terror, during which revolutionary killed uh, thousands of people for political reasons. So when a nationalist respond to violence by violence, it doesn't mean the same. But of course, leftists, in their sick perversion, have inversed the argument and claimed we are defending ourselves. They are claiming a defense after murdering Quentin.
So it's the same extremist tactic that saying
Yeah,
that, well, that they're in a situation of emergency, unless they use violence they're going to be killed, so they are justifying violence in the name of self-defense.
yeah,
And they we know the tendency that the left has to abstraction, and what they constantly understand as constituting a threat to them. A physical threat could take forms that don't just mention imminent physical threat, but
yeah.
it's just frequently disagreement with them.
It's
It's
classic leftist paranoia.
Yeah. Right. So I want us to talk about the reaction, because this is a very significant event, a very sad one, but also a significant event. And it's not one of those things that you read and then you just turn the page and you forget it 5 minutes afterwards. It's something that I'm sure that the French people are talking about and are being concerned with. So I want us to talk about the reactions that several people have, the French people, the media, the state, other parties. I want us to take them each at a time and ask. And I want to ask you, for instance, how do the French people talk about this right now?
Okay, so the French people, of course, normal people are shocked by what happened because the the video was released on the news of the chain TF1 at 8 p.m. The news of 8 p.m. are widely watched in France. So they discovered the event and they were shocked by it. I went to the walk in memory of Quentin in Lyon this weekend. It was full of normal, ordinary people. You had men, women, old, young. Of course, you had also right-wing activists, but also a lot of normal people. I even saw some guy. He didn't know Quentin, but he came here and he prayed. He prayed for him. Just normal people. A lot of faithful people too, but also a lot of uh, non-religious people.
What I want to ask you about this is that I think that usually everyday people who aren't that invested into politics or other disciplines necessarily, they're just people who go about their own lives, they tend to have human reactions. But it's ideologues who very frequently silence these human reactions, if they do have them and they're not psychopaths, for ideological reasons.
Mm.
Ideologues are very frequently to see this as, for instance, an event, especially leftists in this case, that was merited.
Mm.
So their ideology is leading them to watch an event like this and be probably positively inclined. So, how many would you say people are inclined to view it in in a leftist ideological fashion? Because from someone who isn't French, to whatever degree I read about French politics, it seems to me that there is a very strong leftist culture in France,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
there are very frequently violent manifestations of that culture. So, would you say that this is the majority of the French or not?
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I think France has the most far left on in Europe.
Okay.
I think we have the left the more inclined to violence. So of course it has some influence about the reaction to the murder. A lot of people were happy about it. But the same after the death of Charlie Kirk in last September. The same behavior. What you saw in the UK and in America, the same for the death of Quentin. During the walk, we had people uh, chanting anti-fascist slogan. Some people at their window uh, doing the middle finger and insulting the crowd. Uh, there's even a video of some guy next to the walk dancing, dancing when people were passing by. I've also saw some woman screaming on people. So I've seen it. I've seen it. Of course, more people were there to commemorate and to honor his memory, but some were there to provoke. Online, it was also very, very ideological. They were happy about it. They tried to smear, they tried to to to
Defame him.
what did you say?
Defame him. Say bad things
Yeah,
about his character and
thank you. They tried to defame him. Uh, they also tried to defame his friends because three friends of Quentin went quickly in the media to talk about him and to prevent the left to impose a fake narrative of his life. And of course, they were defamed by the left too. So it's pretty fierce and a vicious ideological battle.
I mean, you would think that if they had the conscience, they would at least say nothing instead of just going
Uh,
full attack on a victim that they
yeah.
killed.
Especially because they are knee deep into this. They got the man elected MP, they got his assistant, uh,
Is there
his assist.
outcry? Is there public outrage with that MP? Because the association is very close.
Yeah, well,
Aren't people furious, angry
since
about
since uh,
this?
20, since 2024, there were protestation, but the left is united behind him, and they are defending him, and it's something.
What sort of arguments are they using to defend him? What are they saying? Are they saying that he didn't know, or are they trying to say that he did know? I
Well,
suspect.
it's overt lies.
Okay.
For example, when Raffaellano was in campaign for his election, he claimed to have never been involved in a single act of violence. He didn't care. He didn't care. And why would he? Because even when he lies, the media uh, don't bother to check.
Question: has he cut ties with him, for instance? Has he
No,
said
not at all.
has
Not
he
at all.
said you were participating in this? I can't afford to for you to be an assistant of mine. Has he said even that?
He has fired the assistant, but
Okay.
I mean, it's the bare minimum. Your assistant has murdered someone. It's the bare minimum
Yeah.
of firing
You could
him.
say that he's doing it to save his own skin, to save his own
Uh,
game, which,
yeah, of course, he's doing
right.
so. Because what you need to know, the Young Guard was dissolved by a government decision. During the time, between the time it was dissolved and the time of the murder, Raphaël Arnaud kept advocating for an overturn of this decision. He kept promoting his association. He kept publicly showing himself um, as the representative of the association. I mean, you must understand the left is not afraid at all of the judicial system. Not at all. They did so overtly. And in January 2026, the beginning of the year, a new collective was launched called Génération Antifasciste, Anti-Fascist Generation. And it was it was it was the same people, the same graphist, the same people just created another association.
And the same, these are the people that the judiciary said that they shouldn't associate again. And they
Yeah,
went and they just formed another association.
they formed another
Right.
association while still uh, advocating for the overturn of the dissolution of the first association.
Okay.
They don't care at all. At all. They are not afraid.
How has the state reacted to the murder?
So far, well, for in the following days, they condemned it, but after 2 or 3 days, they started defaming the far right again, the so-called far right again, because uh, because in 2024, Raphaël Arnaud and most of leftist MP and Macronist MPs were elected because they made an alliance together. So they have to defend him. He is their lifeline. They need him to survive politically. because in France, the National Rally is the first political party. And it is currently the first party at the parliament, but with not enough MPs to have the majority. So they need to attack the right by smearing it, by calling it a far right, because something which is important to precise. Mathilde Panot an LFI representative. She claimed publicly on media, if Marine Le Pen or Jordan Bardella wins the presidential election, they won't accept the results and they will take the streets. She claimed it publicly. Marine Le Pen never claimed that. Before
Yeah.
her, his father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, never dared to claim anything like that. But the left can do it, the right don't do it, and even if they don't do it, they are called far right. So
Yeah.
the official, the government, the representative of the government quickly shifted to the old habits. They need to smear and defame and weaken the right because
So
it is the only opposition right now.
so they made it about the far right again.
Again,
They
after
paid lip
3 days,
service
it was
to the victim, and but that the main bulk of the focus of the messaging was about the far right.
yeah. Now it's back at usual. It's again the far right, and the left is left off the hook already.
Right. So how have the media reacted?
Well, the media have reacted the same way. Uh, since the beginning, they tried to claim Quentin was a far-right activist engaged in violent groups, which he was not. They tried to smear his friends and to they they also try to associate Christian symbols to the far right. They tried every play in the book,
Okay.
everything.
Right. So I have a question for you here because I've been doing some research about the topic, and I was searching about the numbers of victims from particular sites and for the last 25 years. And the results were showing that the overwhelming majority of victims come from attacks by Islamists, something like 330 in the last 25 years. And then it said that when it comes to right wing extremism and left wing extremism, these they suggest that more people have died from right wing extremism. So I want to ask you what you make of this, whether you think it's wrong or whether you think that there is any data manipulation. Because the reason why I'm asking you is because I know very well about how the media establishment and governments are reacting to particular murders and tragic incidents.
Yeah.
So the question is, when these incidents take place, there does tend to be a rise in the very violent rhetoric from both sides, and in some respects, both extremes are feeding off each other because they are trying to maintain a kind of rhetoric that is essentially saying war is imminent. We are both in a situation of emergency, so unless we strike first, we're going to be the victim. And the question is this something? These indications correct, or do you think that data has been manipulated? Because
Okay.
the question here is, and that's what I want to get at, is is the establishment doing this because they're running cover for the left, or is the establishment doing it because they are saying that they want to keep the temperature down and they know that violence has come from both sides and this is one of the ways that they're using it? What do you think?
Yeah. Okay, so there's two things to answer to your question. The first is about the data. It is fake. It is a fake study. In the study, what they called victims of far-right violence are just victims of just common altercation. It happens outside of politics, people fighting and killing each other. But if the attacker was engaged or not engaged, but affiliated in some way to the right, then they count it as political violence from the right, which is false because sometimes it is just some guys killing each other after a bar fight. It's not political in nature, but they are counting it. Then on the left, they are, of course, not counting that, but also they are discarding proven political murder from the left. From the left. And right-wing French journalists have already made the investigation about that, and they already found some political murders from the left occulted from the data. Also, the date of the beginning of the study starts at the exact time the violent action of a far-left group stopped. Of course, because if they started earlier, there would have been even more left-wing political murder to deny. So everything in this study is biased, plain and simple. The overwhelmingly majority of murders is from the left, of aggression is from the left. And it leads me to the second thing I have to answer to you. Why is that? It is so because the left is allowed to be violent and to kill people. The right is not. It's as easy. I don't claim far right doesn't exist in France or that right-wing people don't advocate sometimes for violence. It exists as every other country,
But it's
as
much
in
less widespread than the media is trying to suggest. It's
yeah,
the
of course,
left-wing
and
extremists that they're downplaying.
yeah, and if some right-wing activist advocates for violence, he is immediately arrested and punished. So it's not the same at all. And nowadays, uh, every so-called far right groups are more oriented toward defense than attack. It has happened sometimes that they attacked someone, sometimes as a vengeance, sometimes just to attack. It has happened, but it was condemned when it happened. On the left, it's not the same way. They attack, and then they can go free to do whatever they want. The justice doesn't care.
I want to ask you another question, which has some, cultural and also philosophical aspects in it, because I'm thinking of France, and as you mentioned before, the terror, and which I think it started in late 1792, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, yeah, around
So,
that time.
bearing that period in mind, why would establishment politicians allow the far left to grow? Because the question is, the French Revolution, I think, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but it seems to me that one of the main problems with it that led to the violence was that it was much more anti Louis XVI than it was pro something. And then they tried to figure out what to make, as it was going on. And then war started on several fronts. And then they had to
Yeah.
go instantly on a more crazily authoritarian and paranoid view. The question is, bearing that chapter of history in mind, which is one of the most famous chapters in history, why do establishmentarian voices want to allow that thing to grow?
Mm.
Because
Well,
you could say they are very much vigilant against both of the extremes, but it looks like they are much more vigilant against right wingers than against left wing extremism.
yeah, of course. As a French man, you imagine that I have already spent a lot of time thinking about that because it's a really difficult question. The French Revolution is a revolution that succeeded. Since it succeeded, it it was able to write its own history. Of course, a fake history, but it doesn't matter in the sense, even if it's fake, it has been taught and it had some influence on French politics. I think uh, it's a pretty a simple phenomenon to understand. In in criminal psychology, we notice that some violence and people resist, a lot of violence, and they freeze. They are not able to do anything because they are so traumatized by the level, the amount of violence they have to suffer. I think the French Revolution is something like that. It was such a large amount of political violence in a short span of time. It left a deep traumatic memory in French political philosophy. That's why it's uh, and it's something like uh, if we don't give them what they want, they will do violence again. The same kind of reasoning a beaten child uh, is having because he is dependent from his parents, but he is beaten by them. So he tries to adapt himself to the whim of his parents to make sure that violence won't happen again. I think it's really the same thing in French politics, but at a way larger scale. We are philosophically afraid to criticize left-wing political philosophy because of the sheer amount of violence. And Dan Edelstein, an American historian and philosopher, I don't know if he's an historian or philosopher, but it doesn't matter. He wrote a very great book on the idea of revolution, and he makes he makes a comparison between the American Revolution and the French Revolution based on the writings of the people doing the revolution. The Americans were claiming it is a necessary evil. They had a classical conception of revolution. Sometimes it happens, but it is a tragedy. We should do everything we can to prevent it, because when it happens, it is father against the son, neighbors against the neighbors. It is countrymen killing each other. They had a classic, tragic view of the idea of revolution. But the French revolutionary had another vision. They had a vision of the revolution not as a tragic event concluding a failed uh, history, but as a solution and as a way toward progress.
Was it like viewing violence in one case as necessary evil and in the other case as a sort of purificatory good,
Yeah, yeah,
something that
exactly.
absolved, that sort of absolved the sins of the past, and it was a purificatory one.
Yeah,
So
something like that.
yeah,
And it's
but
not,
there's also the other bit, because that's ideological, and there are also some other real life um, circumstances. Is that it's just that after the American Revolution, for some time there wasn't the kind of war that was waged on France by other European monarchies at the time. Which, when you are in war, let's say the revolution takes place, it succeeds, and then if you instantly have to go to war mode, you have to rally yourself against the, in a sense, a war leader,
yeah.
which
Well, before Napoleon took over, a lot of killings had already happened. So I can see your argument, but chronologically, it doesn't fit. The
no, but
war happened.
weren't the people before Napoleon, like Robespierre, like Danton, like others, weren't they in a sense saying that we are in war with the Spanish Habsburgs, with the Holy Roman Empire, with the Austrian Habsburgs?
Yeah,
Weren't they saying that we are at war, and weren't they using that as a justification for saying that many of their political enemies were conspiring against the revolution with the enemy?
yeah, of course, it's classic leftist paranoia.
Yeah.
It's not something new. And if I was talking about Dan Edelstein, it's because there are deep philosophical roots to this leftist paranoia, and also the violence created a kind of a taboo around leftist ideas, because if we talk about them, if we criticize those ideas, then they will they will start being violent again. So it's both the violent philosophy, the paranoia, and the violence which prevented the philosophical critique of leftism in France for a long time.
I want to ask you one last thing, and then we go a bit more back to current affairs. But do you think, to what extent do you think that this kind of this perspective on violence in France, in the French Revolution, and in French political culture also has been affected by the French wars of religion in the last half of the in the latter half of the 16th century? Because
Well,
it's one thing, just okay, yeah, that's the question.
Well, if you take the idea of the French philosopher Jean-Claude Michéa, he claims that liberalism was born from the war of religions, the religious wars. He also claims that uh, liberalism, because of its moral relativism, needs to rely on the market to select between opposing moral propositions. So he's arguing for a philosophical tie between uh, philosophical liberalism and economic liberalism. That's why the left and the center are always together against nationalists, because they advocate for the same liberal idea. What I should say is this liberal idea is very peculiar to France. In my opinion, France has the worst liberals possible, because they didn't take the best ideas of liberalism, but they take all the worst, and they have fanatical revolutionary ideas. So yeah, it came from the religious war in the sense that the liberalism it gave birth to was very crazy. But maybe that's something we could talk another
Another time.
time on a
Yes.
more philosophical ground,
Yeah.
because I think there's a lot to say for and against liberalism, and a lot to precise on the difference between French liberalism, which is the the birth of leftism, and liberalism as an English tradition based on some
We'll get there
anthropological.
we'll get
Yeah.
there another time. I want us to move back now to French politics, and I want to talk a bit generally speaking. What does the future hold for France? So, what do you think is going to happen the next 2 3 years? Because it seems to me that the French left that I see and read about is hell bent on destroying and dissolving the French identity,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
they seem to hate it with a passion. It's typical leftism, but also there may be an augmented factor into it due to the legacy of French leftism. But what do you think is going to happen in the next elections and in the next 5 years?
Well, in a few weeks we have the local elections, so it will be a first test for the left. I think it's difficult to anticipate. I think in some places voters don't care, because either they are not French or they are so ideologically possessed that they will vote left no matter what. In some other places, maybe the killing will be a big handicap for them. What we are hoping for is a right-wing victory. If it happens, it will be a first for the National Rally, because historically, this party has been very weak on local elections. So there's that. Of course, violence will keep happening. Uh, then next year, we have the presidential election. Uh, in my opinion, more people are going to die until the presidential election.
So you think violence is going to get worse? It's going to escalate.
Oh, yeah, 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 it will. Of course it will. Well, they just have killed someone, and they are defending the murderer, and they are advocating for more. What do you think is gonna happen? It's it's not difficult. We just have to listen to them and to believe them.
So there's always this element of the very crazily violent and low impulse control people who will just go out and say it on social media. What do the French politicians say
Well, Jean-Luc
about that?
Mélenchon is claiming his affection for the young guard. What do you need more? It-
Okay.
Mathilde Panot went on television and she said, if the National Rally wins, we won't accept the result. We will
But
take
he
the
says
streets.
he expresses his support for that, but wasn't that organization dissolved? You mean for the new association
No,
that
no, no,
was
no.
created by the same people?
They don't care. He expressed his affection for Raphaël Arnaud, for the Young Guard, for the Antifa, for everyone. Génération antifasciste and La Jeune Garde, it's the same thing basically. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to which one he expressed affection. There's no difference. He expressed affections to the people having murdered Quentin. It's as easy, as simple as that. So, of course, under those conditions, violence will keep happening. It's obvious.
So how could the right wing victory happen, take place?
Well, first of all,
What's the most realistic scenario that would lead to a right wing victory?
we have to make sure they can't fraud the election. It's uh, it's not easy because the French electoral system is more solid than other electoral systems. But Macron worked to weaken it. He worked to weaken a lot of things, so why not the electoral system? Then, in the ballot box, it will certainly be a victory. Certainly be a victory. The current sondage, what is the English word? The the ah the thing on which Reform UK is pretty high.
Yes,
It's called
the
and
polls.
the polls. Thank you. On the polls, the National Rally is uh, is very is leading the race with a big margin. It
Yeah,
is over 30%, and the second is under 20.
yeah.
So there's a really big gap.
Where is Mélenchon's party, and does it take is support for it decreasing across the years, or is it increasing?
So far, the party of Mélenchon um, is not in second place, but it doesn't mean anything because the left has an history of what we call vote utile. So when you vote for the closest candidate to your side, which you think can win,
Mm.
they vote, and last election, they voted for Mélenchon because he was the only left-wing candidate in position to eventually win. So the other left-wing candidates fell harshly. So right now, Mélenchon is not very high, but we have seen it before. People right now don't want to vote for him, and in a year from now, during the political campaign, they will be afraid to lose against the right, and they will go vote for Mélenchon. So he will keep rising in the polls. In my opinion, I think there's a high probability he gets to the second round of the French election because the center is very weak, and I don't see it getting better because they are doing an horrendous politics akin to Starmer in UK. It's very horrendous. So I think Mélenchon really has an opportunity on the second round to get to the second round, but there everyone will vote against him.
Yes.
So the worst case scenario for from the right will be the national rally on the second round against a candidate from the center,
Mm.
and there everyone voting for the center against the national rally. That will be the worst case scenario. It is possible. Personally, I don't think it will happen.
Okay, because
Uh,
you think the center is so weak at the moment that it has to be national rally against a leftist.
Yeah, and Jordan Bardella is making his campaign because Marine Le Pen has been made ineligible by the French judiciary system, which is a scandal that you have covered on Lotus Eaters
Yes.
back then. So it will probably be Jordan Bardella. Jordan Bardella is doing campaign on the center right.
Yeah.
Also, he has managed to get himself an image of the liberal wing of the National Rally. which is always good for the center-right electorate because they are very touchy on fiscality and
Economics.
economics. So I don't. There's a part of the center-right that could go voting for the National Rally. Also, in France, Marine Le Pen and the National Rally is not alone. There's Eric Ciotti, who was the former president of the center-right party in France, who joined Marine Le Pen in 2024. There's also Marion Maréchal, the niece of Marine Le Pen, who created a small right-wing party in alliance with the National Rally. So there is some center-right party in alliance with the National Rally, which is a pretty good argument for them. That's why I don't see every centrist voting for the center candidate. Some of them will vote for the National Rally just because they are sick of the mayhem, the chaos, and Jordan Bardella tries to lure them by painting himself as an economically serious candidate
Yeah.
and against those socialist policies.
Right. Raphael, thank you very much for this interview. I really think it was good. And before we end, I would like you again to tell people where they can find your work. And we're definitely going to discuss things another time.
Yeah,
The
well,
more philosophical we said before. So where
yeah,
can
yeah.
people find you again?
People can find me on my ex account, Raph Paillot. They can find me on Substack, raphaelpaillot.substack.com. They can find my YouTube channel in French called Panache. And soon I will be translating my own writings, and I've already created a Substack for that, but it's not published yet. So if you follow me on X, I will announce it soon when it will be done. And I would like last word uh, to my friend, because Quentin was a good man, a man of faith, a man willing to help others, and a devoted Catholics. He was loved by his parents and his sister. He was loved by his friends, and he was the least deserving person to die in those horrendous circumstances. Also, he is the best martyr the right could have opted for. So I'm pretty proud of the fact his friends decided to speak on his behalf and to not let the left defame him. And I thank you again for the opportunity to speak on his behalf because he can't do it anymore. And it was pretty difficult news to learn about his death. So thank you again.
Raphael, thank you very much.
Thank you.